Shri Guru Gauranga, Gandarvika Girid Hari Radha Vinod Bihari, Radha Govinda Ki Jai, Nitali Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravrata Tarya Asta Terasata Shri Srimad Abhay Charanara Vinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Dali Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravrata Tarya Asta Terasata Shri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Srila Gurudev Ki Jai, Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Astatara Sata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vigyan Bharati Maharaj Ki Jai, Dali Vishnu Vishnupad Astatara Sata Shri Srimad Srila Gaura Govinda Maharaj Ki Jai, Dali Vishnu Vishnupad Astatara Sata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Vedanta Maharaj Ki Jai, Dalila Vishnu Vishnupadas Tatarasata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Pragyan Keshava Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Dalila Vishnu Vishnupadas Tatarasata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Rakshak Shiradev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai, Dalila Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Guruvacharya Tatarasata Shri Srimad Param Gurudev Jagapuru Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki, Mahabhagavat Srila Gaura Kishore Das Prabhuji Maharaj Ki, Shakta Goswami Satchit Ananda Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur Ki, Vaishnava Sarvabhaum Srila Jagannath Das Prabhuji Maharaj Ki, Shri Gaurivaranda Acharya Srila Baladev Vibhushan Prabhu Ki, Shri Rasika Acharya Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur Ki, Shri Narottam Srinivashananda Prabhu Trai Ki, Shri Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami Prabhu Ki, Shri Rupa Shri Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Das Raghunath Shat Goswami Prabhu Ki, Shri Suruttamara Rayaranda Shri Gaura Parashat Vrinda Ki, Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki, Prem Sikho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki, Shri Navadvip Maya Purnama Ki, Manga Devi Ki, Shri Harinama Sankirtana Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki, Jamuna Devi Ki, Shrimati Purnamasi Bhagavati Yoga Maya Ki, Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki, Gopishwara Mahadev Ki, Braj Dham Ki, Jagannath Baladevi Subhadra Devi, Siddhasan Chakra Chetradam Tota Gopinath Ki, Narasingha Bhagavan Ki, Bhakta Pravara Prahlad Maharaj Ki, Anand Koti Vaishnavinda Ki, Samagata Bhaktavinda Ki, Shinitai Gaura Premanande.
Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutaha Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Langayate Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gauda Tvishe Namaha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Brindai Tulsi Debai Priyai Keshavasya Cha Krishna Bhakti Prade Devi Satyavachai Namo Namaha. Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, I'm offering my unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Gurudev, Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. And then I'm offering my same unlimited Dandavat Pranams and my Shraddha Pushpanjali at the lotus feet of my most worshipable beloved Siksha Gurudevs, Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Goswami Maharaj, and Nityalila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Asto Tarasata Sri Srila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And my Dandavat Pranams to the lotus feet of all of my Sri Rupa Nuga Guru Varga, and my Dandavat Pranams to all the Vaishnavas and to all the Vaishnavis. So we've actually, we completed on Hera Panchami Day the discussion that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had with Sri Sarup Damodar Goswami, and at the end with Srivas Thakur. And on my own, I've continued reading on from, it's pretty much near the end of that chapter 14, but there's so many different exchanges that go on between Mahaprabhu and his beloved devotees, his Parshadas, who came from Bengal and all. And it's so sweet, so I'm going to continue to read that from where we left off. Let's see. Pastimes. Okay. Try to find the actual place. Yes. What is wrong? Okay. Oh. And then. Oh. Ah, okay. All right, so for chapter 14, verse 228 is the last statement that Swarup Damodar Goswami made in response to Srivas Thakur's boasting about the opulence of his Lakshmi Devi and of the Lakshmis in Vaikuntha in comparison with the gopis. So this verse is telling that the anklets on the damsels of Brajabhumi are made of Chintamani stone. The trees are wish-fulfilling trees, and they produce flowers with which the gopis decorate themselves. There are also wish-fulfilling cows, kamadhenus, which deliver unlimited quantities of milk, and these cows constitute the wealth of Vrindavan. Thus, Vrindavan's opulence is blissfully exhibited. So this is actually a whole string of verses where Swarup Damodar Goswami has been mentioning one by one the different opulences that are far, far greater. Yes. The natural opulence of Vrindavan is just like an ocean. The opulence of Dwarka and Vaikuntha is not even to be compared to a drop of that ocean. So we've always heard this before, but here Swarup Damodar has actually told that every dust particle in Vrindavan is Chintamani, invaluable, you know, and what appears to be simple forest life, village cowherd life, and using the flowers and so forth from nature. But in actuality, there is unlimited actual wealth and opulence in terms of jewels, in terms of all of that. Far, far more than Vaikuntha. So this is of course due to the fact that Aishwarya is there in Vaikuntha, but it's not absent in Vrindavan. It's even more. That's the whole point of understanding. It's even more than in Vaikuntha. But it's covered with sweetness and so much ras. So therefore it's drowning. You know, there was one example Gurudev gave. In India, when they carry these big containers full of milk, they even carry them on the back of their motorcycles for delivery, you know, coming from the Goshala. And they're big and metal and cylindrical, right? And in order to prevent them from slushing around and coming out, they put straw on the top of that. Yeah. So when they take the straw out, there may be one or two little pieces that are still floating in there, you know, because it's like a big clump of straw. So he compares the opulence of Vaikuntha in Vrindavan to being one of these little pieces of straw that is floating in the milk. And sometimes it comes up to the surface, then it goes back down. But it's always completely submerged in the milk. You heard that?
No, I haven't heard that.
Yeah, that comparison. Because it just can't come up, even though it does. Even though it's clear to everybody that Krishna has all these unlimited powers and everything, but it cannot happen in Vrindavan that they have the mood of awe and reverence. Can never be there. So, yes, that's why Swarup Damodar Goswami is saying, my dear Srivas, please hear me with attention. You have forgotten the transcendental opulence of Vrindavan. The natural opulence of Vrindavan is just like an ocean, and the opulence of Dwarka and Vaikuntha is not even to be compared to a drop. Sri Krishna, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, full of all opulences, and his complete opulences are exhibited only in Vrindavan Dham. Vrindavan Dham is made of transcendental touchstone. Its entire surface is the source of all valuable jewels. And the Chintamani stone is used to decorate the lotus feet of the maidservants of Vrindavan. Vrindavan is a natural forest of desire trees and creepers. And the inhabitants, they do not want anything but the fruits and the flowers of those desire trees. And in Vrindavan there are cows that fulfill all desires, Kamadhenu, and their number is unlimited. They graze from forest to forest, they deliver only milk. The people want nothing else. In Vrindavan, the natural speech of the people sounds like music, and their natural motion resembles a dance. The water in Vrindavan is nectar, and the Brahma Jyoti effulgence, which is full of transcendental bliss, is directly perceived there in its form. The gopis there are also goddesses of fortune, and they surpass the goddess of fortune who abides in Vaikuntha. In Vrindavan, Lord Krishna, he's always playing his transcendental flute, which is his dear companion. So actually, Swarup Damodar has quoted the verse from the Brahma Samhita. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpatarava Druma Bhumnischintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam. And Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami has taken each item mentioned in that long verse, and then he's paraphrased it in Bengali, very beautiful Bengali poetry. Now, the damsels of Vrindavan, the gopis, they are super goddesses of fortune. Not just goddesses of fortune, super goddesses of fortune. The enjoyer in Vrindavan is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. And the trees there are all wish-fulfilling trees. And the land is made of transcendental touchstone. The water is all nectar. The talking is singing, the walking is dancing, and the constant companion of Krishna is his flute. The effulgence of transcendental bliss is experienced everywhere. Therefore, Vrindavan Dham is the only relishable abode. So that's the translation of the Brahma Samhita verse. And that's at the end. After all the Govinda Mari Purusham prayers are completed, then there's this verse. Yes. Shriya Kanta Kanta Parama Purusha Kalpataravo Druma Bhun Mischintamani Ganamayi Toyam Amritam Katha Ganam Natyam Gamanamapi Vamshi Priya Saki Chidananda Jyotim Paramapi Tadasvadam Asvadyam Apicha. So, now after hearing this response from Swarup Damodar Goswami, Srivas Thakur then began to dance in ecstatic love. And then he vibrated sounds by slapping his armpits with the palms of his hands, and he laughed very loudly. Thus Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard these discussions about the pure transcendental mellow of Srimati Radharani. And absorbed in transcendental ecstasy, the Lord began to dance. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing in ecstatic love, and Sarup Damodar was singing, the Lord said, "Go on singing, go on singing." And then the Lord extended his own ears. This is all taking place in the garden of the Gundicha Mandir. And the very next day, no, when we were reading it, it was the next day, which was the Return Ratha Yatra festival, but that's mentioned here, that for about 10 days, the whole Ratha Yatra festival is going on. So,
can I ask a question? The devotees, do they, what is their particular relish in returning Jagannath from the Vrindavan garden of Gundicha to his throne at Sri Mandir? I mean, do they participate in that return rite?
Look, well, we have to see that from the angle of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Yes, they all. Mahaprabhu himself. But he's all satisfied now, because he's completely in the mood of Srimati Radhika. Krishna came back to Vrindavan. So many pastimes were experienced. So Mahaprabhu never leaves that mood. They're always relishing the pastimes of Vrindavan. Like even in the 4 months of the rainy season, there's Janmashtami. It's going to be described how they're always in that mood, that Krishna is in Vrindavan. So, but even when Mahaprabhu enters the temple, he's seeing that son of Maharaj Nanda. He's not seeing the son of Vasudeva Devaki. Yeah. So it's the same. But the mood of beginning the Ratha Yatra after a whole year, then that specific mood of bringing Krishna to Vrindavan, you know. But now he's arrived in Vrindavan, so Mahaprabhu is absorbed in that mood. So, yes. Thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love was awakened by hearing the songs of Vrindavan from Swarup Damodar Goswami. And in this way, he inundated Purushottam Jagannath Puri with love of Godhead. Purushottama Grama Prabhu Preme Bashaila. Bashaila, inundated with prema. Now finally, the goddess of fortune returned to her apartment. And in due course of time, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was dancing, then the afternoon arrived. After much singing, all 4 Sankirtan parties grew fatigued. But Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's ecstatic love increased twofold. While dancing, absorbed in Srimati Radharani's ecstatic love, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, you got to hear this verse. I have to highlight this verse. I have to highlight this verse. So, while dancing, at this time, with 4 Sankirtan parties and so forth, and while dancing, absorbed in Srimati Radharani's ecstatic love, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in her very form. Yes. In Srimati Radhika's form. Seeing this from a distant place, Nityananda Prabhu offered prayers. Now, seeing the ecstatic love of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Nityananda Prabhu did not approach, but he remained a little distance away. Only Nityananda Prabhu could catch Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he could catch him. But the ecstatic mood of the Lord would not stop. And at the same time, Kirtan could not be continued. Swarup Damodar then informed the Lord that all the devotees were fatigued. So seeing this situation, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came to his external senses. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then entered the flower garden with all his devotees. After resting there for some time, he took his afternoon bath. Then there arrived a large quantities, a variety of food that had been offered to Sri Jagannath, and a variety that had been offered to the goddess of fortune. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu finished his afternoon lunch, and after his evening bath, he went to see Lord Jagannath. And as soon as he saw Lord Jagannath, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began to chant and dance. And afterward, accompanied by his devotees, the Lord enjoyed sporting in the lake called Narendra Sarovara. So you know, right near Gundicha is Indradumna Sarovara. But some distance away, more towards like the middle of the Grand Road, of the whole 2-mile distance, is Narendra Sarovara. So, yes. So then, after entering in the flower garden, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took his meal. In this way, he continuously performed all kinds of pastimes for 8 days. The next day, Lord Jagannath came out from the temple, and riding on the car, he returned to his own abode. As previously, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees chanted and danced with great pleasure. So during the Pandu Vijay, so the whole festival, just as before, no difference. During the Pandu Vijay, that means when they're carrying Lord Jagannath back into the temple or carrying him out, then Lord Jagannath was carried, and while he was being carried, a bunch of silken ropes broke. Now, when the Jagannath deity is carried, at intervals he is placed on cotton pads. And when the ropes broke, the cotton pads also broke due to the weight of Lord Jagannath, and the cotton floated into the air. So Ramananda Vasu, two of his associates, Ramananda Vasu and Satyaraj Khan, they were present from Kulinagram, and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with great respect, gave them the following orders. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ordered Ramananda Vasu and Satyaraj Khan to become the worshippers of these ropes, and every year bring silken ropes from their village. There's a little purport here. It is understood that silken rope, it was being manufactured by the local inhabitants of Kulinagram. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked Ramananda Vasu and Satyaraj Khan to get ropes every year for Lord Jagannath's service. You know Kulinagram?
Yeah, I've been there.
Which place? Do you remember what it is? Where it is?
Is that the? That's. I've been there, and it's different than where Nityananda.
Ekachakra.
No, not Ekachakra, but where
Nityananda.
Goridas Pandit. That's Kalna, right?
Yeah.
That's Kalna. So is it within Navadvip?
Yeah.
Yes. So it's really close to. Kolar.
Actually, Kulinagram
Kolar.
is the present day what they call Navadvip, the train station area of Navadvip.
So it's called in Kolar.
Yeah, well, no, the whole area there was called Kulinagram. Then it was renamed Navadvip for the train station and all of that, because the whole area is Navadvip Dham.
Yeah.
So, but then that town became known as Navadvip town. But it's interesting that to this day in the Navadvip town, just like around that house that you have there, all click clack, click clack, click clack.
Yeah.
It's still a cloth producing place, silk, everything. So in those days, Mahaprabhu told them that they should provide that every year. And then after telling these two that they should bring the silken ropes from their village, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed them the broken silken ropes. And he said, just look at this sample. You must make ropes that are much stronger. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then informed Ramananda Vasu and Satyaraj Khan that this rope was the abode of Lord Shesha, who expands himself into 10 forms and who serves the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So after receiving orders from the Lord for the rendering of service, then the fortunate Satyaraj and Ramananda Vasu were highly pleased. Every year thereafter, when the Gundicha temple was being cleansed, then Satyaraj and Ramananda Vasu would come with the other devotees, and with great pleasure they would bring the silken rope. Thus, Lord Jagannath returned to his temple and sat on his throne, while Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to his residence with his devotees. And thus, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed the Rath Yatra ceremony to his devotees, and he performed the Vrindavan pastimes with them. The pastimes of Lord Chaitanya are unlimited and endless. Even Sahasra Vadana, Lord Shesha, cannot reach the limits of his pastimes. So praying at the lotus feet of Sri Rupa and Sri Raghunath, always desiring their mercy, I, Krishna Das, narrate Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, following in their footsteps. Shri Rupa Raghunatha Padijar Ash, Chaitanya Charitamrita Kahi Krishna Das. So that ends the chapter 14, and chapter 15 begins. So let me find this on my other. Yes. So this is Madhya Lila, chapter 15, titled The Lord Accepts Prasadam at the House of Sarvabhaum Bhattacharya. So the following summary of this chapter is given by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his Amrita Pravaha Bhashya. After the Rath Yatra festival, then Sri Advaita Acharya Prabhu worshipped Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with flowers and tulsi. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in return worshipped Advaita Acharya with the flowers and tulsi that remained on the offered plate. And then he said a mantra. Yosi soasi namostute. Yoasi soasi namostute. Whatever you are, you are. But I offer my respects unto you. Mahaprabhu and Advaita Acharya had a very special relationship. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhar Radha Govinda Ji. So, then Advaita Acharya Prabhu invited Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for prasadam. And when Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees performed the Nandotsav ceremony, because that's not long. Nandotsav is not too long, about a month after of the Rath Yatra festival. There's Baladev Purnima, Rupa Goswami Disappearance Day Festival, and then 1 week later, there's Janmashtami. So when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees performed the Nandotsav ceremony, then the Lord dressed himself as a cowherd boy. And thus the ceremony was very jubilant. Then the Lord and his devotees observed Vijaya Dashami, the day of victory when Lord Ramachandra conquered Lanka. and the devotees all became soldiers of Lord Ramachandra and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the ecstasy of Hanuman. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the ecstasy of Hanuman manifested various transcendentally blissful activities. Thereafter, the Lord and his devotees observed various other ceremonies. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then asked all the devotees to return to Bengal at the end of 4 months. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sent Nityananda Prabhu to Bengal for preaching, and he also sent Ram Das, Gadadhar Das, and several other devotees with him. Then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, with great humility, he sent some Jagannath Prasadam and a cloth from Lord Jagannath to his mother through Srivas Thakur. When the Lord bade farewell to Raghava Pandit, Vasudev Datta, the residents of Kulinigram, and the other devotees, he praised them for their transcendental qualities. Ramananda Vasu and Satyaraj Khan asked some questions, and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed them that all householder devotees must engage themselves in the service of Vaishnavas exclusively devoted to chanting the holy name of the Lord. He also instructed the Vaishnavas from Kanda, as well as Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya and Vidya Vachaspati, and he praised Murari Gupta for his firm faith in the lotus feet of Lord Ramchandra. Considering the humble prayer of Vasudeva Datta, he established that Lord Sri Krishna is qualified to deliver all the conditioned souls. And thereafter, when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was accepting prasadam at the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, then Sarvabhauma's son-in-law, Amogha, he created trouble in the family with his criticisms. The following morning, he was attacked by the disease of Visuchika, cholera. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very kindly saved him from death and enlivened him in chanting the holy name of Lord Krishna. So, text 1 of this chapter. Sarvabhauma grihe bunjan svanindakam amogakam angi kurvan sputam chakre gaura svam bhaktavashyatam. While Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taking prasadam at the house of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, then Amogha criticized him, but still the Lord accepted Amogha, thereby showing how much he was obliged to his devotees. Jai Jai Sri Chaitanya, Jai Nityananda, Jaya Advaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita Shrotagan, Chaitanya Charitamrita Jara Pranadhan. All glories to the listeners of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, who have accepted it as their life and soul. E Mata Mahaprabhu Bhakta Gana Sange, Nila Chale Rahi Kore Nritya Gita Range. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed at Jagannath Puri, he constantly enjoyed chanting and dancing with his devotees. Pratama Vasare Jagannatha Darshan, Nritya Gita Kore Danda Paranamastavan. In the beginning of the day, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw the deity of Lord Jagannath in the temple. He offered him obeisances and prayers, and he danced and sang before him. After visiting the temple, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would remain outside during the Upala Bhog offering, and he would then go to meet Haridas Thakur, and then he would return to his residence. So in the purport, Prabhupada is saying that at noon, when there was an Upala Bhoga offering in a place called Bhog Vardhana Kanda, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would go outside the temple. And before going outside, he used to stand near the Garuda Stamba column, and he would offer his obeisances and prayers. Then afterwards, the Lord would visit Siddhabakul, where Haridas Thakur lived. And after visiting with Haridas Thakur, the Lord would return to his own place at the abode of Kashi Mishra. So in our minds, we can go. We've been there. Yes, that little triangle. The temple, the mandir, and Siddhabakul, and then then returning back to Kashi Mishra. Gorevasi kore Prabhu nam samkirtan, Advaita ashiya kore Prabhura pujan. Sitting in his room, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would chant on his beads. And then Advaita Prabhu would come there to worship the Lord. Sugandhi salila dena padya achaman, sarvange lepaye Prabhur sugandhi chandan. So while worshipping Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Advaita Charya, he would offer him scented water to wash his mouth and feet. And then Advaita Charya would smear very fragrant sandalwood pulp all over his body. Gale maladena matai tulasi manjari, Dyoda hate stuti kare pade namaskari. Sri Advaita Prabhu would also place a flower garland around the Lord's neck and tulsi flowers, manjaris, on his head. And then with folded hands, Advaita Charya would offer obeisances and prayers unto the Lord. Puja patre pushpa tulsi shesha jay achilo, se sab loya Prabhu acharye pujilo. So after being worshipped by Advaita Charya, then Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would take the dish containing flowers and tulsi, and with whatever paraphernalia remained, he would worship Advaita Charya. Yosi sosi namostute e mantra pade. Mukha vadya kori Prabhu hasaya acharyere. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would worship Advaita Charya by chanting the mantra, whatever you are, but I offer my respects unto you. And in addition, the Lord would make some sounds within his mouth that would make Advaita Charya laugh. In this way, Advaita Charya and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would offer their respectful obeisances unto each other. Then Advaita Charya would extend an invitation to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again and again. Bar bar. Indeed, Sri Advaita Charya's invitation is another wonderful story. It has been very vividly described by Sri Vrindavan Das Thakur. So since Advaita Charya's invitation has been described by Vrindavan Das Thakur, I shall not repeat the story. But I shall say that other devotees, they also extended invitations to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So day after day, one devotee after another would invite Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the other devotees to lunch, and they would also hold a festival. All the devotees remained at Jagannath Puri for 4 continuous months, and they observed all Lord Jagannath's festivals with great pleasure. Krishna Janma Yatra Dine Nanda Mahotsav Gopavesh Hoila Prabhu Loya Bhaktasam. The devotees celebrated the festival of Janmashtami, Krishna's birthday, which is also called Nanda Mahotsav, the festival of Nanda Maharaj. At that time, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees dressed themselves as cowherd boys. So who else was born on Nanda Mahotsav day? Do you know? The day after Krishna Janmashtami, we celebrate till midnight. But the next day after, is when Nanda Maharaj saw his newborn baby, Krishna, in the morning of the next day. So that day is called Nanda Mahotsav, or what's the other word? Like on our calendar, it says it by a different name. It'll come to me. So, who was born also on that day? The day after Krishna's birth, some very great personality was born in this world on that day, on the Vaishnava calendar. You don't know? Srila Prabhupada. Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. He was born as Abhay Charan Day in Calcutta on the day after Krishna Janmashtami. So for us, that's a very, very special day. 2 days in a row, Krishna Janmashtami and then Prabhupada's appearance.
And when he was given rebirth by his spiritual father, he just extended that birth name, Abhay Charanara Vinda?
Yeah, he added Aravinda at the end. And then later, after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati left the planet, shortly after, the Vaishnava community, specifically Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Maharaj, they all wanted to offer him some title, because in Gaudiya Math this was very common, that devotees would be given certain titles according to their services that they had done and so forth. So Srila Prabhupada was given the title Bhakti Vedanta. At first they were going to call him Bhakti Siddhanta. Did you know that?
I've heard that.
Yes. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj suggested, no, better we don't give that name as a title to anybody. Yes. So now Mahaprabhu and all the devotees, having dressed up like cowherd boys on Krishna Janmashtami, on Nanda Utsav Day, Nanda Mahotsav, yes. All the devotees, dressed as cowherd boys, they carried pots of milk and yogurt balanced on rods over their shoulders. And thus they all arrived at the festival grounds chanting the holy name of Hari. Kanaya Kutiya Achen Nandavesh Dhari Jagannath Mahati Hoyachen Vrajeshwari. So there's a devotee named Kanai Kutiya. He dressed himself like Nanda Maharaj. And then Jagannath Mahiti, he dressed himself as Mother Yashoda. At that time, King Prataparuja was also personally present with Kashi Mishra, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and Tulsi Padicapatra. So as usual, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he danced jubilantly, and everyone was covered with milk, yogurt, and yellow turmeric water. And at this time, Srila Advaitacharya said, "Please do not be angry. I speak the truth. I shall know that you are a cowherd boy only if you can wheel this rod about." So accepting Advaitacharya's challenge, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took a big rod and began to wheel it around and around. Again and again, he threw the rod into the sky and caught it when it fell. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wheeled and threw the rod, sometimes over his head, sometimes behind his back, sometimes in front of him, sometimes to his side, and sometimes between his legs. All the people laughed to see this. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu whirled the rod in a circle like a firebrand, then the heart of everyone who saw it was astonished. Then Nityananda Prabhu also playing and whirling the rod. Who can understand how they were ecstatically immersed in the deep emotions of the cowherd boys? So following the orders of Maharaj Prataparudra, the temple superintendent named Tulsi, he brought one of Lord Jagannath's used cloths. So I think of the perverted reflection of this in this world. Baton twirling. You know, they used to do that. I don't know if they still do, but cheerleaders and circus acts and so forth, they used to twirl the batons. I think it must have originally come from this. Yeah. So this used cloth of Lord Jagannath was brought. Then this valuable cloth, it was wrapped around the head of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And the other devotees, headed by Dvaitacharya, also, they had the cloths wrapped about their heads. And in ecstasy, Kanai Kutiya, who was dressed as Nanda Maharaj, and Jagannath Mahiti, who was dressed as Mother Yashoda, they distributed all the riches that they had stocked at home. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was greatly satisfied to see this. Accepting them as his father and mother, he offered them obeisances. In great ecstasy, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to his residence. And in this way, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, known as Gauranga Sundar, performed various pastimes. Now, Vijaya Dashami, Lanka Vijaya Dine, the day when Lanka was conquered by Lord Ram. So on the day celebrating the conquest of Lanka, a day that is known as Vijaya Dashami, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu dressed up all his devotees as monkey soldiers. And displaying the emotions of Hanuman, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took up a large tree branch and mounting the walls of the Lanka fort, he began to dismantle it. I'm just remembering the beautiful plays, dramas that we had here. And some were dressed as Hanuman. That one devotee was really good, who was dressed as Hanuman. He was in both part 1 and part 2 of the Ram Leela pastimes. And he really played very well, Hanuman. And he had certain kinds of eyes, and actually his hair was like matted hair normally, but it just fit perfectly with the whole costume. And his wife, you know what she was in the play? There were 2 devotees, I hadn't met them before. But
from Miami?
Maybe.
Yeah, they're from Miami.
Yeah, his wife was the one who did the fire twirling.
Yeah.
Oh, that was the best I've ever seen. I've seen it before in Russia. Some devotee also knew that, but the way she did it, and to the music that was being played, oh, it was spectacular. Yeah.
That was her first time here.
Yeah, they're very nice devotees. So anyway, Mahaprabhu became absorbed in the emotions of Hanuman. And now he took up a large tree branch and mounting the walls of the Lanka fort, began to dismantle it. In the ecstasy of Hanuman, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu angrily said, "Where is that rascal Ravana? He has kidnapped the universal mother Sita. Now I shall kill him and all his family." Everyone became very much astonished to see the emotional ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and everyone began to chant, "Jai, Jai," again and again. Jai, Jai, Bole Bar Bar. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his devotees, they participated in all the festivals, including Rasa Yatra, Deepavali, and Uttan Dvadashi. Yeah, that's spring. That's coming all the way up to Kartik, Deepavali. Then Prabhupada says in the purport, we never knew what the Deepavali festival was really, but remember how in our temple room during Kartik, we didn't know what Kartik was really. We just knew the name, but in our temple rooms, I remember in LA, they used to have a little diorama of Mother Yashoda and Krishna. trying to tie Krishna's belly. I think the sculptors like Bhardraj and the others, they made that, and they kept it up in the side of the temple room there when I was there in 1975. And then we would sing the Damodar Ashtakam to that melody. Namami Swaram Satchidananda Rupam, that one. And and then we would offer lamps. That's right, we would offer lamps. So that was our Deepavali. So the Prabhupada is describing the Deepavali festival takes place on the dark moon night in the month of Kartik, October to November. So that's the Amavasya. And when we were with Gurudev year after year after year, we'd be there at Govardhan, and then we would all walk to Manasi Ganga, and it would be the most sweet mood and atmosphere of thousands and thousands of lamps all the way around, at every stairway going down, so many lamps, and also boats floating and have so many lamps on them. The Rasa Yatra, or the Rasa dancing of Krishna, takes place on the full moon night of the same month. It's actually on both nights, the beginning full moon night and the end full moon night. Then Uttana Dvadashi takes place the day after Ekadasi, in the waxing fortnight of the moon in the same month. Yeah. So that's the last 5 days, Bhishma Panchak. And it begins with the disappearance day of Gorakishore Das Babaji, which is Ekadasi. And then it goes for 5 days. So all the devotees of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu participated in all these festivals. Then one day, the two brothers, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu, consulted with each other while sitting together in a solitary place. And no one could understand what the brothers discussed between themselves. But later, all the devotees could guess what the subject matter was. And thereafter, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu called for all the devotees and asked them to return to Bengal. In this way, he bade farewell to them. But you know what they were discussing?
Sankirtan or distribution?
The Mahaprabhu was telling Nityananda Prabhu, you must go and save Bengal. I cannot go now anymore. I will not be traveling. So you will have to do it. And you should not come every year. You should not come every year. So they discussed that. I think in Chaitanya Bhagavat it's much more vividly described. And it is in Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's one of my favorite parts is when Nityananda Prabhu takes this order on his head and now he becomes full of ecstasy of praying. And now he goes with the various devotees that were with him and they set out to go to Bengal to preach. And the journey there is one of my favorite parts. Because they were in such ecstasy, they didn't know which direction they were going. And they would ask people along the way. And the people would say, oh, no, it's like, it's like so many miles in that direction. And then they'd get some distance and then they'd ask again. And the people would again tell them, no, you've come too far, you have to go in this way. So bidding farewell to all the devotees, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu requested them to return to Jagannath Puri every year to see him, and then to see the cleansing of the Gundicha temple. So, we'll continue tomorrow with this very nice chapter. Jai Shri Shri Guru Gauranga Gandharvika Giridhari Shri Shri Radha Govinda Ji Ki Jai Chaitanya Charitamritam Ki Jai.